We're going to get started. It's a little past 7 here, so do your best to find a nice spot. And I'm going to hand everything off to John, and we can get started now.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Freeman. I am the project manager for the proposed Westwood Canton Street Improvements project, which will be presented tonight. I work in the project management section at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation's Highway Division headquarters in Boston. Once the hearing is completed this evening, the attendance sheet will become a part of the public record. So if you would like your attendance at this hearing to be part of the public record, please sign in on the sign-in sheet located outside. Handouts containing details regarding this project are next to the sign-in sheet. First, some housekeeping items. This hearing will be recorded and is being broadcast by the Westwood Media Center. Ample opportunity for questions and comments will be provided at the end of the presentation. Also, please take a moment to read this notice on diversity and civil rights. All MassDOT activities are free of discrimination, and we welcome diversity. Now, I would like to introduce the members of the hearing panel. Lawrence Cash from MassDOT Project Management, my supervisor. Joe Doucette from Project Development out of MassDOT's District 6 office. Craig Sheehan from our Right-of-Way Bureau. Francisco Rivera and Michael Murphy from MassDOT's Complete Streets team. Andrew Schlenker from MassDOT's Landscape Design team. Jonathan Rockwell, Kevin Dandrade, and Tom Quinlan from TEC, the municipal design consultant for this project. Todd Korchin and Brendan Ryan from the Town of Westwood Public Works Department. And Representative Paul McMurtry and State Senator Rush's office representative. So welcome, everyone. In the handout, the notice of hearing is included on page 2. This notice appeared in the Westwood Hometown Weekly and Westwood Press on September 14th and September 21st, 2023. A copy of this notice will be attached to the final hearing transcript. Flyers were posted in key municipal locations, and our outreach team from HNTB contacted various neighborhood organizations to inform them of the hearing tonight. The public will also have the opportunity to ask questions through our Public Involvement Management application, PIMA. A handout has also been provided on the hearing webpage. Page 3 of the handout explains the purpose of the hearing, which gives us an opportunity to make a formal presentation of the proposed project and at the same time allows us to record your input regarding the project. This is your opportunity to speak about the project. We are here to listen to your comments, and please understand that nothing is finalized with the design. The project we will be presenting is Canton Street Improvements. It will reconstruct Canton Street, improving drainage and utilities, and enhancing safety for all users by providing pedestrian and bicycle accommodations. We are currently in a 25% design stage, which means that the plans are not yet complete, and we welcome your feedback. We estimate the total project will cost approximately $20.4 million, which will come from federal aid funding, with the Federal Highway Administration funding 80% of the total construction cost. MassDOT funds the remaining 20%. This project must be programmed in the statewide Transportation Improvement Program in the appropriate federal fiscal year in order for MassDOT to solicit bids for eventual construction. The total estimated cost of the project does not include any right-of-way acquisition costs. The design is expected to be completed by 2028. Construction is expected to be completed within 3 construction seasons. In a few minutes, Jonathan Rockwell of TEC is going to present this project in more detail and explain how Canton Street will be reconstructed to create safe walking and cycling facilities and replace other aging infrastructure. But first, I would like to ask Craig Sheehan to explain the right-of-way procedures.
Thank you, Jonathan. This is more of a legal notice. I know Todd from the town of Westwood has been out to talk to many of the abutters, but this just goes over the rights of the property owners and responsibilities that the town has to the property owners. So good evening. When the Commonwealth, acting through its Massachusetts Department of Transportation Highway Division, indicated it would accept this project for funding, the town of Westwood accepted certain responsibilities. One of those responsibilities is acquiring all the necessary rights in private and public lands for the design, construction, and implementation of this project. My function is to review and recommend procedures that the town may use to acquire these rights. Procedures used must comply with both federal and state regulations. Current design plans indicate that there may be 13 fee acquisitions, 46 permanent easements, and 124 temporary easements required for the project. Property owners impacted by this project will be contacted by your municipal officials. The municipal officials will present the proposed impacts to each owner and discuss the methods with which they may acquire the needed rights for the project. Frequently, municipalities may appeal for donations to minimize the acquisition cost to the community. However, donations are not required, and property owners are entitled to an appraisal, review appraisal, and just compensation. Right-of-way documents will be provided to each owner to help them understand the acquisition process and how the project affects their property. Affected property owners' rights are protected under our Mass General laws, primarily Chapter 79, and because this project is receiving federal funds, property owners' rights are further defined under Title III of the Real Property Acts of 1970 as amended. I will be happy to answer any general questions concerning right-of-way activities during the open forum. If anybody has a question about their particular property, I can certainly meet you after the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Now, John Rockwell will describe the town's design project in detail for you. Please keep in mind that the project we are presenting to you tonight is still in the design stage. Once TEC is done telling you about the design, I'll explain the hearing procedure and then open up the hearing to your questions and comments, which we will take into consideration when completing the project's design. Please hold your questions until after the presentation.
All right, thanks, John. All right, can everyone hear me okay with the distance of the microphone here? I apologize if my back's turned to some folks a little bit. So quite a turnout. Before I jump into a presentation, I'm just curious, show of hands, how many of you are direct abutters on Canton Street? How about residents of side streets and neighborhoods off of Canton Street? Is this too quiet? Okay. And then elsewhere in town, residents? Okay, thank you. So this graphic just illustrates the limits of the proposed project. We begin at the East Street Rotary up at the interchange of I-95 and head south approximately 1.9 miles, encompassing the entire roadway of Canton Street. This graphic also shows kind of the proximity of all the dense neighborhoods on both sides of the roadway, proximity of the Amtrak and T station at University Station, all of the commercial retail development along University Ave, both in Norwood and Westwood. So why was this project initiated? What does the town see as the project need here? One of the primary drivers of the project is pedestrian and bicyclist safety. Those are the most vulnerable users of the roadway. And as all of you know that know the roadway very well, the existing roadway today, relatively narrow, very narrow shoulders, no pedestrian accommodations along the roadway at all, no dedicated bicycle accommodations at all. Jumped ahead too far there. So the existing travel lanes are marked with sharrows. It's a very unsafe, it's not considered a bicycle accommodation for cyclists. Many of the side streets, as you can see here, have sidewalks, but they just dead end when they hit Canton Street. Nowhere for people to go, no connectivity along the roadway today. Cyclists and pedestrians who want to use the roadway are forced to walk along the shoulder. And with the relatively high volume of traffic here, close to 10,000 vehicles per day, The variable speeds, 70% of people are driving over the posted speed limit, which varies from 30 to 40 miles an hour along the roadway at different segments. The project is also looking to address traffic and safety issues. This is just one example here down at the signalized intersection at University Ave, where the pedestrian crossings across the slip right turn lanes to University Ave are unsignalized. They're under yield control, whereas the rest of the intersection is controlled by traffic signals. This exposes pedestrians to vehicles turning right and is no longer compliant in accordance with AAB, which is the Architectural Access Board. On the right side here, just another example of some of the infrastructure along the corridor, the roadway that would be addressed as part of the project. Up at the east, toward the East Street Rotary, the existing roadside barriers, the guardrail, the end treatments don't meet current crash standards. And then also along the roadway, utilities underground. We don't see them, but they support our standard of living. The existing water main out here is over 100 years old, and the gas main also may need to be replaced prior to the project. And then on the right side here, just an example of the drainage conditions. The drainage system today, intermittent along the roadway, not a complete drainage system, and it wasn't originally designed to meet the more intense storms of today. So what do we want to accomplish? What are the project goals that have been identified? Primarily, calm traffic and enhanced safety. Again, for those most vulnerable users, given the volume and speed along the roadway and the lack of accommodations today. So we want to create safe, accessible pedestrian accommodations along the entire roadway and provide connectivity to some of those existing destinations along the roadway. Connectivity to the Downey School, connectivity to the existing sidewalk networks on the side streets, connectivity down to University Ave, where there's restaurants, retail. Also looking to minimize and mitigate impacts to the scenic character and aesthetics. Obviously, everyone here recognizes, we've had conversations with many of the abutters. One of the goals of the project is to minimize and mitigate those impacts. We're going to be bringing in a landscape architect to advise on restoration of the stone walls. We're doing an inventory of the stone walls along the roadway, and they would advise on details and specifications to restore those as close as possible to look as they do today. There's very different segments of stone wall along the roadway, as you're well aware. Some are mortared stone walls, some are the old farmers' stone walls, just balanced stone. The goal would be to replicate those as close as possible. Landscape architect would also advise on tree mitigation, whether there are opportunities within the public right-of-way to plant trees to mitigate for the loss of trees along the roadway. We'd have an arborist prior to the next design stage do a construction impact assessment with us. They would help evaluate, are trees healthy? Are some trees dead? What are the construction impacts associated with that? Do we need to trim some trees? Do we need to remove some trees? Are there root zone impacts to other trees that aren't directly impacted? And another consideration with respect to the trees, some of them may be invasive species and the arborist may recommend that those be removed. Another project goal is to introduce separated bicycle accommodations, given, again, the speed and the volume of traffic on the roadway exceeding or approximating 10,000 vehicles per day. And then ensuring infrastructure asset longevity, really just those utilities, the guardrail, the things that we don't really think about that are key infrastructure elements from a public works perspective. So how has the design progressed so far? Some of the milestones. Should I do the handout? Would that be?
In the center of the room.
Yeah, the source is on me regardless of. We'll probably get a feedback, right? All right, is that any better? Yes, no, maybe? No. Is it worse?
We can hear and hear you. They're talking
Well, I understand. Is there, I mean, can we try to squeeze more people in? Turn up the volume. How's this? Any better for those out in the hallway? A little bit? Okay, I'll try to keep the mic close and shout in a friendly voice. Okay. So how has the design progressed? Some of the milestones that the project's gone through to date. In February 2015, the project was initiated with MassDOT's Project Review Committee, and it was approved to be eligible for state and federal funding in the future. May 2019, the town authorized design funds at annual town meeting. March 2021, we had our first public meeting where we introduced the concept for the preferred alternative. In February 2022, really the first major design milestone, submitted a 25% design to MassDOT. And then this past May, we had another public meeting for an update to the public on where we were, what we'd seen for comments from MassDOT, and where the design was at that point. So what alternatives have been considered to date? Two primary alternatives were considered to date, both of which would fully meet, the typical section would fully meet the healthy transportation policy that MassDOT's established. And the reason we selected those two alternatives at this point was given the ample right-of-way along the roadway, 50 to 60 feet, can accommodate those cross-sections without land takings. So the goal is to fully meet the healthy transportation policy whenever possible. Alternative one that we looked at on the top here would provide an on-road bicycle facility. And since the volume is approaching 10,000 vehicles per day and the speed in some stretches approaching 40 miles an hour, bicycle accommodations are the recommended alternative in that case. So this cross-section shows a 5.5-foot sidewalk on each side of the roadway, 12-foot travel lanes for vehicles, and then a bike lane, 5 foot wide, separated by a 2-foot buffer on each side of the roadway. So that bike lane would be at grade with the travel lanes. Alternative two, let me back up. That cross-section is 49 feet wide. Alternative two, again, separated bicycle accommodations and pedestrian accommodations on both sides of the roadway. But in this alternative is an off-road bike facility. The off-road bike facility in this case, we're proposing a shared use path, 8 to 10 feet wide along the roadway, with a 3 to 5 foot buffer. That shared use path allows for cyclists and pedestrians to travel in both directions, mixed traffic along that facility. On the opposite side of the road, 5.5-foot sidewalk. And then the travel lanes in this case, 11 feet wide plus a 2-foot shoulder. And this cross-section varies 43 to 45 feet. So after evaluating the impacts and the benefits of those two alternatives, we selected alternative two as the preferred alternative. And the rationale there is primarily due to the width that we're talking about. Alternative one has a wider footprint, which means more impacts to trees, more impacts to stone walls, more impacts to right-of-way. The curb-to-curb width of alternative one, also being wider, would tend to encourage drivers to drive faster. Typically when more pavement, a wider pavement is available, drivers feel more comfortable, their speed increases, and it becomes less safe for the vehicles, for the pedestrians, and the cyclists. So alternative two was selected to advance to 25% design. So I'll walk through the preliminary design, go through this relatively quickly. I think probably safe to say that the majority of people here are kind of anxious to have comments, anxious to be heard, anxious to have their questions answered. So I don't want to belabor the details of this plan too much. At the end of the meeting, we have some plans available that we can walk through specific details with people as time allows. So beginning at the East Street Rotary, we'd be reconstructing the existing pedestrian crossings here and then providing a new bicycle connection to terminate that shared use path into the shoulder of the Rotary. Recognizing there's no dedicated bicycle facility on the Rotary today, but there could be something that was developed in the future. We're proposing these rock-fill slopes, which are steep slopes in order to reduce the potential for impacts to the wetlands that are on the east side of the roadway here. Replacing the guardrail, as I mentioned earlier, bring it up to the current safety standards. And then all along the roadway, we're proposing to reconstruct the existing traffic calming islands that were constructed back in 2015. Anecdotally, we hear from a lot of residents that those haven't been very effective, but every traffic calming measure that you do implement has at least a small incremental effect to help reduce speeds. So the more that we can combine together, the overall speed reduction will benefit. So advancing up to the intersection, of Downey Street here, the sidewalk on the west side of the roadway would connect to the Downey Street sidewalk, which is currently under construction. At the intersections that have the raised truck aprons today, we're proposing to reconstruct those. However, they need to be flush in order to allow an accessible route across for the sidewalk. Those truck aprons have the benefit of reducing the speed of turning vehicles. Passenger vehicles do not traverse the truck apron typically, but a truck, larger truck that needs more space to turn would be able to drive over those. And as you see here, as we step down the corridor, continuously, there'll be the shared use path called out on the east side and the concrete sidewalk called out on the west side. So this is just a representative typical section at one of the raised traffic calming islands. So this shows, again, the 5.5-foot sidewalk on one side, the shared use path on the opposite side with that buffer, 6-foot wide median, 11-foot lane, 2-foot shoulder, and a 1-foot offset to the raised island there. Now as we step down the corridor, this is the roadway, this is Blue Hill Drive here. So we'll be connecting the shared use path, would provide bicycle connectivity to the existing bicycle lanes on Blue Hill Drive. A new pedestrian crossing at Courier Lane, and then the sidewalk connection to Adams Street. And this is the representative typical section beyond those traffic calming islands. 11-foot lane, 2-foot shoulder in each direction, sidewalk on one side, shared use path with a buffer of variable width on the opposite side. Now this rendering just depicts that upper section where the roadway total footprint from the back of the shared use path to the back of the sidewalk is approximately 45 to 46 feet wide. And just illustrated here is that the public right-of-way in this area is 50 to 60 feet. So that cross-section is accommodated within the right-of-way typically with no takings in this area. Now stepping further south from Forbes to Cushing, we'll be connecting to the Forbes Road sidewalk, Kilronan, and Perry Drive sidewalk, and again reconstructing the traffic calming islands and providing a pedestrian connection here to the existing Forbes Road sidewalk. Heading toward Everett Street on this view, similarly connecting to the Partridge Drive sidewalk, reconstructing those traffic calming islands. Another render looking south within that segment of roadway, the 45 to 46 foot wide roadway with the shared use path on the left, sidewalk on the right, and again, the right-of-way, public right-of-way in this area, 60 feet consistent from here to the south. Heading down to Hemlock Drive, again connecting to the sidewalk on Hedgerow and Hemlock. And then as we begin to go down the relatively steep hill heading down toward University Ave, we made a design decision here to reduce the shared use path width to 8 feet and then eliminate the grass buffer here. And this has been applied for through MassDOT's design exception process because a 10-foot wide shared use path is the typical standard that is required. But the topography in this segment of the roadway, very steep uphill on the left side of the roadway as you're heading downhill, very steep downhill on the right side. Providing that 10-foot minimum shared use path with a buffer through here would have had significant crippling impacts to many of those driveways heading down the hill. The next segment, just one thing I wanted to highlight here, I think it's at 686 Canton Street, proposing a retaining wall along that parking lot in order to avoid any parking lot impacts along that commercial property. And then a render heading down the hill, this particular render shown at one of the raised traffic calming islands where the total roadway footprint, including the ped and bike facilities, is 44 to 50 feet wide, and that's accommodated within the 60-foot right-of-way here. Now this last view includes the end of the project limit at University Ave, the traffic signal there. As we cross over the CSX rail spur bridge, the project does not include reconstruction or modifications to that bridge. It's not within the scope of this project, given the bridge's condition is considered to be acceptable. So in order to accommodate the shared use path and cyclists over the bridge, the bicycle and ped facility on that side will drop lower down to roadway grade as it crosses the bridge. It will be separated from the vehicular traffic horizontally by a striped buffer and vertical flex posts. And then once you pass the bridge, it'll come back up to curb elevation. Then the improvements at the signalized intersection of University Ave, relatively modest. We're not looking to reconstruct this intersection entirely. It hasn't been very long since it was last reconstructed. We're making those modifications to the right turns that I mentioned, adding traffic signalization to those current free right turns or yield-controlled right turns, and also making some improvements to terminate the shared use path in a safe and accessible manner, allow the users on the path to access the existing facilities on the intersection today. So there are bike lanes on University Ave today, and bike lanes are being constructed on the Dedham Street leg as part of MassDOT's ongoing project there. So just to highlight some of the benefits and key features for pedestrians and cyclists. This map shows the pedestrian connectivity throughout the project area. Really illustrates that Canton Street is sort of the spine that's going to connect all these pedestrian infrastructure that exists today. The sidewalks up at the East Street Rotary, sidewalk being constructed now on Down East Street. A number of these side streets have sidewalk networks. Also University Ave, sidewalks on both legs. And then similarly, Dedham Street heading to the east. Those sidewalks are being reconstructed as part of the ongoing project there now. And then the bicycle connectivity. The facilities for bicyclists today really are the Blue Hill Drive bike lanes, which were striped as part of a Complete Streets project. And then we'll be introducing a dedicated bicycle facility along Canton Street to replace those shared lane markings. And then on University Ave, the south leg of that intersection has on-road bike lanes striped today. And MassDOT's project for Dedham Street will include on-road bike lanes striped there as well. So the image on the left here just depicts a shared use path. This path in this image is actually relatively wide compared to the path that is proposed on Canton Street. But it gives you an idea of what that facility will look like, buffered from the roadway. And then on the right-hand side here, these are the markings that we would propose at University Ave intersection to get cyclists safely across the intersection, to bring awareness to the drivers that cyclists may be crossing there as well. All the pedestrian and cyclist crossings will have high visibility crosswalk markings and warning signs. We're also proposing pedestrian level street lighting at each of the crossings to improve the safety for users that are crossing at night and in low light conditions. On the left here, so we're proposing, these are called rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And these are push button actuated warning devices that are really intended to increase the yield compliance for vehicles for someone that wants to cross the roadway there. So they're not activated until somebody wants to cross the roadway and presses the push button, and then they alert oncoming drivers that there may be a pedestrian crossing in the roadway. And on the right side of the image here, just an image of a cement concrete sidewalk, which is what is proposed on the west side of the roadway. Now, this is standard colored concrete. Given the scenic nature of Canton Street, there's the ability to tint the concrete, make it blend in with the environment a little better. So what are the environmental, cultural resource, and community impacts? We're really talking about what are the permitting steps that the project's going to need to go through. First is the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. This project will file for a categorical exclusion, which would avoid having to file an environmental impact statement. Section 106 is historic review, so Mass Historic And MassDOT's Cultural Resources and Historic section will review the project for any potential impacts to abutting historic properties, given that there are some easements and grading needed in front of those properties, as well as the stone wall impacts. Section 4F is related to publicly owned recreational land, and the Courier Reservation land, an easement is required from that property, so that may trigger Section 4F review. We'll also be filing a notice of intent, or we anticipate filing a notice of intent with the Westwood Conservation Commission, and that's due to the work up near the East Street Rotary that is in proximity to the wetlands there. And then MEPA is Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. So we'll have to file this project, as we anticipate, given the tree impacts to public shade trees, that it's going to trigger an environmental notification form. And because of the project's proximity to environmental justice communities to the north, the project will also likely trigger an automatic environmental impact report through MEPA. So an ENF and an EIR. And then locally, we're going to be required to file for a scenic road permit and have a public shade tree hearing. Typically, that's a combined hearing with the planning board and the tree warden to address the public shade tree impacts along the roadway and address any impacts to stone walls. And then the last is Article 97, which is a legislative action required, particularly in this case tied to the easements that are anticipated to be required from the Courier Reservation property, which is a conservation property, public open space. So the construction approach here, it's a phased construction approach. This type of project that's improving every aspect of the roadway, typically utilities are relocated first, drainage is relocated next, then the sidewalk, curbing, and shared use path would be constructed. Following that, tree replacements, stone wall rebuilds, paving, striping, signing, generally in that sequence. So throughout the project, access to abutting businesses and residents would be maintained. There will be short time duration closures needed at individual driveways for the driveway reconstruction itself to tie it into the roadway and sidewalk grade, but also if a utility or drainage line is going past your driveway, for that one day or half a day, there would be a need to close your driveway. MassDOT does have a resident engineer on full-time for these type of projects, and they would coordinate with abutters regarding those type of impacts and schedule a convenient time and ensure that you're not trapped in or out of your driveway. Most of the work, we don't anticipate any long-term detours. Most of the work is anticipated to take place with alternating one-way traffic under police officer or flagger control. And work would generally typically try to avoid peak hour of traffic on the roadway, given that connectivity to I-95 to the north and the heavy commerce area to the south. So looking ahead to next steps, generally group these looking at kind of the next plus or minus year time frame. From this fall through the spring, we're going to be evaluating what we hear tonight from the public, from the abutters, circling back with MassDOT's team, and then circling back with Board of Selectmen to echo to them what we hear tonight from you, and discuss what design alternatives may need to be explored, given what we've heard to date. We'll also be continuing public outreach through this period. In the summer, there's a planned local public meeting prior to the 75% design submittal. And that public meeting would be the opportunity to present any significant design changes that may evolve from the feedback that we hear from the public. Beyond this year, fall of '24 to winter of '25, again, another local public meeting to discuss the feedback that we get from that 75% design submittal, present that to the public, any changes to the design that are anticipated from that feedback. And this is also the time frame when we'd want to start beginning the environmental and local permitting, and the town would begin outreach, detailed individual outreach on the right-of-way acquisition process. And beyond that, as John mentioned earlier, this project is programmed for 2028. So between 2025 and 2028, a long span to finalize that design. There's multiple design stages that must be gone through at that point. Additional local public meetings are anticipated during that time frame to update the public, update the select board on what changes are happening to the design and where we are with the process of permitting and right-of-way acquisition. And also through this period, We would need to finalize right-of-way acquisition of easements, and then ultimately soliciting bids for construction. With that, back to you.
Do you have copies of this presentation to pass out to the folks in the audience so they can ask intelligent questions? My memory's not good enough to remember 47 pages.
We do not have copies, hard copies.
Why not?
So we do have
I
the handout
apologize.
that is an overview of the hearing, and we are going to move into Q&A now, right, Jonathan Freeman? Oh,
I'm actually going to go up on the stage up here just because I do have some notes. So my name is Todd Korch. I'm a Director of Public Works. I've had a fortunate opportunity to meet with several of you on site, on location. For those of you that don't know me, I've been the Director of Public Works now for over 12 years. I've worked for the town for over 20 years. I have a history of growing up in town at my grandparents' house on Deerfield Ave, and lived for about nine and a half years with my family, my wife, my 2 children, and recently moved to Walpole. I'm still 4 minutes away, so response time with respect to winter and everything else, I'm still pretty local. I want to welcome everyone here. I know, obviously, we've had multiple discussions. Myself, John Rockwell, Brendan Ryan have had opportunities to meet with some of you at your homes directly. To date, we've met with 45 individuals. Out of the 45 individuals that we've met with, all 45 are adamantly opposed to this design, and we hear you, it's fine. It's the first time I've been clapped for since playing baseball at Northeastern, so if you want to do that again, it brings me back to that day. Out of the 45 individuals that we have met with, 44 have referenced the desire for sidewalk accommodation. And I think if you want to clap again, that's fine. If not, that's great. There was one individual that we met with most recently, and they'll be nameless, and I'm not going to call individuals out, but I just want to acknowledge that we're 44 for 45 in establishing a level of common ground. The common ground being that there are 44 out of 45 that do want a level of an accommodation. MassDOT is here. We're here going through a current process just to hear the public. I think the most important thing here is acknowledging that 44 out of 45, and be it obviously, it's a testament to the town and the entire community to see, like, this level of attendance is insane. Like, town meeting doesn't get this. So to have everyone here and go about this the right way and keep things cordial and see if we can come to that common ground. See if perhaps there's something that we can identify as a community that we all want, that perhaps there still might be a funding mechanism in place that we can proceed and pursue and take advantage of. That would be a win. I think, the conversations that I've had with all the individuals that we met with thus far, and I'm presenting scenarios, and just hear me out for a second. Scenario A would be, obviously, everybody showed up tonight and everybody heard this design, and everyone here in front of you is doing what I've directed them to do, what our department has directed them to do, is to look at our options and look at the ways that we can, as a community, take advantage of a funding opportunity and design something and look at it. Right now, this is all we're doing, is looking at it and saying, this is the version of what we would get paid for exclusively. There's a commitment, FY28. This is what would be put out there if the town and if everybody in here was screaming, yelling, saying, this is awesome, Todd. This is the way to go. Clearly, there's a lot of opposition, and I get a sense, I don't gamble, but I get a sense, if I was gonna bet, that that's not the vibe. Scenario B would simply be, we as a community have a constructive conversation at the podium tonight saying, yeah, we had a 44 out of a 45 number like this for that, and we do want an accommodation, and let's express that. Like, what level of accommodation do we want? And is there a level of flexibility that we as a community can express to MassDOT and see if they're willing to acknowledge that and have some further discussions and see if we can actually get a funding mechanism developed to pursue that. Scenario C is we all, again, 44 out of 45, and then again, whatever the numbers end up being here, acknowledge that we want a sidewalk accommodation. Well, there might not be that level of flexibility, but we as a community can pursue that, still complete a design and have something in the event that the town is in a position fiscally to fund that, and then come forward at some point in time, hopefully in the future or not, if there isn't an outside funding mechanism, that we as a community can fund that. I typically, when I speak to people, I hardly ever make notes, and in this case, I did make notes. So just give me a second, because I'm not used to like looking and referencing. I referenced the common ground, I referenced be cordial, because I do. I think we all have to acknowledge, you look at things, sometimes we look at them out of our own lens. The opposition, I completely agree. I've met with several individuals. I'm not selling anything. TEC isn't selling anything. TEC was hired to perform a task that I had ordered directly. It was a decision that I made to incorporate the shared use path, just so everyone in this room could understand this is what we would need to do and incorporate to have full funding, to have a full commitment. If we don't want to do that, let's figure it out. Let's scale it back. But by no means should TEC be ridiculed, scrutinized. That's my call. I ordered them to do that. And we're at the point where we do have a commitment from the state that we could receive a $20 million project. We're just offering that. We don't have to do this. There's no excavator showing up tomorrow. There's no excavator showing up in 2 years. It's not going to happen if the community doesn't want it to happen. And I think overall, if we all look to our left, right, behind us, out in the hall, people can't even hear. There's so many people here. It's a testament to the community, because in most communities in the Commonwealth, I won't say most, but a majority, you would not have this level of attendance for an issue like this. You would just go out, or Brendan and I would just go out and talk to MassDOT and TEC and have the thing bid out, and we'd go out and put the project in the ground with no feedback. That isn't how we roll in Westwood. That's why we're a unique community, and quite frankly, that's why we're the best community, because we're all here tonight talking about this and discussing this. And we want to make sure, again, we find a common ground if we can. And if there's no common ground and we can't decide on a specific project to put in play, as Director of Public Works, I won't push something down someone's throat. And I think over the years, we have prided ourselves in taking advantage of opportunities through grants, through specific programs, to make the town better. And I always say, I use this as an example, you could probably walk around this town with a single bag and find it hard to pick it up, like pick up a full bag of trash. You could walk the curbs, the granite curbing, and find it hard to find a weed that grows through the curbing. It's hard to find a pothole. It's hard on any given day to cancel school in the winter, and it's not because of just him and I, it's because of the team that we've developed at the Department of Public Works, and that whole team reflects on things like this here. Like it means a lot to us. An individual called me the other day, and he's a very reputable and very credible individual in town, and he had a great deal to do with University Ave, and I won't mention his name, but most of you know him in this room. And he said, don't take things so personally. And I'm not making this about our department by any means, I'm making it about the community. But I want the community to understand that we care so much about what goes on here that by no means would we push a project that everybody doesn't want down your throat. What we do want to do is take a proactive approach and give and provide options for the community to look and say, wow, the state will pay for that, the federal government will pay for that, but it's not quite what we want. And how can we work through it, and how can we possibly get to a point where we can get there and achieve that common goal of what that 4445 represents. So that said, I mean, I truthfully, I've met with, again, the 45 residents. Actually, I lie, it was 31. I had to bail out because I had a doctor's appointment, and Brendan met the other 14 at one meeting on Metcalf Ave. But I apologize. If there was anything that was perceived to be deceitful, that wasn't the intention. Again, I think if you guys drive around and you look at our fields, you look at our roadways, you look at the things that we do, it's only with good intentions. And with respect to this project, it's with a proactive, good intention approach that we're trying to do something here. And if everybody here doesn't want it, that's fine on my watch. I just want to be able to provide that opportunity so at some point in time, if people question why didn't we as a community have an answer as to why we did not. So I would just ask, moving forward, there's a lot of residents here. Mrs. Reaver, we've met with you. Mr. Yazalian, we've met with you, and I know people are going to speak. Everybody respect everybody's opinion. There are two sides here, and again, let's find that common ground. In closing, I will say that I've had a conversation with the select board. We are going to revisit this meeting, the feedback that came out of this meeting on October 23rd. We've already had a scheduled meeting with MassDOT the morning of October 23rd. And I'm hopeful that we actually have a very constructive conversation. It gives us a few weeks to see what happened during this meeting. See what the constructive feedback is, the cordial feedback that we received tonight. Have that conversation with MassDOT. See if perhaps there are levels of flexibility that present themselves. And then that evening, on October 23rd, myself, Brendan, John, the members from TEC, will go before the select board, and we'll have that conversation with the select board and see what our next steps are. Again, I promise you, you have my word, there's no excavator showing up. We just want to hear the constructive feedback and see where we can go from here. So again, I thank you all for being here, and let's make this a productive meeting, a cordial meeting, understand there's two sides of this, and we'll see where we go with it from here, okay? Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to take a little pause here for a sec. The Westwood Fire Chief is here and just has a few words to say. We're way over capacity, so
Good evening. Sorry to interrupt. My name's Andy Mahan. I'm a captain at the Westwood Fire Department. So I know how important this is to all of you, and that's why you're here. And we want to keep this going, but in order to keep this going, we need to address a few safety concerns real quick. So we're over capacity in here right now by about 15. So if we could have 15 people either move out to the hallway, either here, there, or even out back, if you don't mind the fresh air, that would bring us under the capacity, and we'll be good to go. And then I'm just going to have them move a couple things to keep all the aisles and exit ways clear. And just as a reminder for everybody in the room, so there's 3 exits here. There's one in the back corner. If you go out this back door on the left side, right outside that door there's another one. And if you're going to exit here, I'm going to encourage you to walk all the way down the hallway and exit through the front door. Don't take this right door here that leads into a courtyard that you can't get out of in the event of an emergency. And we also have, we have the fire prevention captain that's going to come in and kind of supervise and just keep an eye on the occupancy for the rest of the meeting. So if you could just give us 5 quick minutes, we just want to move a couple things around to make sure the exits are clear, and then we can get this restarted for you. Thank you.
more of like a useful path you can get.
Okay, we can get started again. What I'd like to do is just have those that have an opportunity to speak, after you've had an opportunity to speak, we're going to try to have like a little rotation going on, so those that are out in the hallway that might also like to speak, so that we don't have the room over capacity again.
Before I open the hearing to questions and comments, I would like to explain the hearing procedure. First, as stated previously, the purpose of this hearing is to solicit your input regarding this project. As the plans are not yet complete, we may not be able to answer all of your questions or respond to all of your comments at this time. Next, we ask that anyone who wishes to have his or her comments entered into the official hearing transcript, please approach the microphone, identify yourself by name and affiliation, whether you are an abutter, local official, or concerned citizen, and spell your last name. This is necessary in order for us to obtain a full verbatim transcript as required by law. Also, the last sheet of the handout is a mail-in sheet, or you can also use the email address, MassDOT Project Management at dot.state.ma.us. That's MassDOT Project Management at dot.state.ma.us. If you have any questions or comments which you would like to submit in writing, please use this sheet for that purpose. You may leave this sheet with me tonight, or you may mail it to the department within 10 business days of this date, and it will become part of the official record. Finally, it is normal procedure to ask elected officials to offer their comments first. Are there any federal, state, or local officials who would like to speak at this time? Yes, please.
Hello. Good evening. My name is Michael Kraft, and I am chairman of the Westwood Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee. Our committee is appointed by the Select Board and tasked with identifying pedestrian and bicycle safety and traffic issues and making recommendations to the appropriate town boards, committees, and officials. The Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee strongly supports sidewalks and all steps taken to increase pedestrian and bicycle safety throughout the town. But while these are important safety initiatives, they involve substantial capital improvement and investment and require an understanding and commitment from all who are impacted. While the state funding lends substantial weight to the decision, this cannot be the only consideration. Aesthetics and other impacts must also be considered. Canton Street is one of the major arteries through our town. It is a cut-through for traffic on Route 128 going to 95. According to recent police monitoring records that I received, which are slightly at variance with what the folks at TAC had, over 8,000 vehicles travel that roadway each day. And to give you an idea of what that means, that's 3 million cars a year. So those vehicles are traveling every day on often in excess of the posted speed limits. It's a beautiful and long, narrow roadway with a pastoral quality, to be sure, but nearly all of the abutting property owners are residences, many with young children. So, with that many cars on a narrow road with no sidewalks and many children, this is a recipe for disaster. With the new slip ramp coming up on I-95 and Topgolf being constructed just across the Canton line, things will certainly get worse as Waze and Google Maps directs more and more motorists to use Canton Street as a shortcut. Right now, if you live on Canton Street and your child wants to visit her friend just a couple doors down, you must get in your car and drive them. There's no other way to do this safely. If they want to ride their bikes, you must put the bikes in your car and go somewhere else. And yes, there are also adults who enjoy walking, running, and bicycling, all of which are restricted due to the safety concerns. Our committee very much wants to see change. Pedestrian and bicycle accommodation will improve safety and the community for all involved. The cost to accomplish this will be extraordinary. Unless the town is willing to fund this out of our own pockets, then the best alternative is to receive this grant money. This is certainly a tremendous opportunity, but unless something changes with the state, the only way to get that money is to have both pedestrian and bicycle accommodation. And I know that Todd will work hard to see what he can do to obtain more flexibility. Now, the project will provide tremendous benefits to the town and the neighborhood, including greater safety for cyclists and pedestrians, opportunities for neighbors to easily visit and commune with one another, and creating a connection between Islington and University Ave. However, in building this path, there will be many large and old-growth trees removed. This will greatly affect the character of the street and the neighborhood in a negative way. And for those whose property is directly affected, it will change completely their front yards. Unfortunately, these changes cannot be avoided. However, we are hopeful that there are ways in which the design can be modified to improve the aesthetics, including planting of many replacement trees to create a tree-lined street, as you might see in Europe, adjustments to the location of the walls, and even the location and direction of the pathways themselves. Most importantly, people on both sides of this must come together, be flexible, be willing to compromise, as Todd had suggested. We must work together to find the best solution and not be told what to do. For those who are not aware, Todd Korchin, who just spoke, our director of DPW, has been deeply supportive and involved with many initiatives in our town to improve pedestrian and bicycle resources, including finding grant money and saving the town tens and even hundreds of thousands of dollars to improve pedestrian and bicycle accommodation. One such project is right outside the door of this school, where a new stretch of sidewalk has just been built, and I'm sure many of you have noticed the flashing illuminated crosswalk signals throughout town, so I thank you, Todd, for those. Our committee has heard directly from Mr. Korchin, and he said so tonight himself. This is only the 25% design stage. There will be many opportunities for community input that will affect the final design. We've also heard from the abutters, or we will hear from them, and we are empathetic to their concerns. Our committee has talked with several. Mr. Korchin and the Select Board have committed that they will continue to work with all stakeholders, and especially the abutters, on ways to improve this project. The state may agree to modify the requirements and still provide the funds, or the town may prefer to pay for this ourselves. All of this needs to be explored. In conclusion, we very much want to see a sensible and aesthetically pleasing sidewalk and bicycle accommodation on Canton Street. The current plan is certainly a big step in the right direction, but absolutely needs more work. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Julie Irvine. I live at 199 Canton Street. I live in one of the oldest houses in Westwood, the Currier House, it was called.
Excuse me for 1 second.
I'm sorry.
I have to officially open the hearing to the public and be sure there are no more elected officials that wish to speak. If not, then please go ahead.
So, anyway, I do live on Canton Street. I'm in a butter. I've been there for 54 years. We've gone along with everything that's happened. The entrance to 95, University Park, all through the years, my husband and I haven't been adverse to anything in the town. We love this town. We love it. We grew up in the city and we came here to give our kids a nice upbringing. And we love to see the baseball field with the lights when people didn't want that. When the School Street School was torn down, they didn't want that. A beautiful playground. So many wonderful things that we have. And I see all these wonderful young people coming into our town now for our phenomenal education that we offer. However, I just want to say that as the abutters, you have no idea what we were told at doesn't matter. Okay, there we go. So the thing is, I don't want, everything that Mike said that's exactly what we want. We want everybody to look at the plans again and make everybody happy. We're not on different sides. We're all the same town. We're all neighbors. No one's against anybody. We just want the best that we can be. And to sum it up, we have 604 signs, a petition with 604 people in our town that do not want to go along with these plans. So again, on behalf of them, please look over the designs again. And Todd, you've done a good job, and hopefully you don't think we threw you under the bus. We really didn't. We appreciate your hard work. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Shelley Reaver. Last name is R-E-E-V-E-R. I live at 549 Canton Street. I'd like to start out by saying that, Todd, I appreciate your comments, and I certainly hope that going forward, the town and the residents can come to an acceptable solution. However, because the hearing tonight is about the plan before us, my comments will be directed toward that plan. I've lived on Canton Street for 30 years, and I want to tell you about two of the reasons why I am opposed to this project. The first is that how the project would affect Canton Street, and the second is that the process the town has used thus far. I'll get more into that. So Canton Street is a very pretty street for anyone who's driven down it. It's actually designated as a scenic way under the laws of Massachusetts because it has many old leafy green trees that line the road, very large, and lots of stone walls. Some of them are hundreds of years old. In many places, the trees form a canopy over the street, and in fact, the trees and the stone walls are a visual and a sound buffer for the residents because there are so many cars on Canton Street, and we enjoy that. This project that's being proposed involves a 5-foot sidewalk, a 5-foot grassy strip, and an 8 to 10-foot shared use path. That's adding a total of 18 to 20 feet to the width of the street. And this would result in hundreds of trees and dozens of stone walls being removed. This project would destroy the scenic character of Canton Street and adversely affect our quality of life by bringing the cars closer to our front door. And when I say close, I mean close. The town decided that it would be nice for Canton Street to have a sidewalk, but because the town has regulations, or the state has regulations that say we'll only pay for a sidewalk if we have a bike path, the town has included this immense shared use path in the project. This is not an appropriate area for a bike path. It would irreparably harm our street, and for what? To connect the industrial, University Ave, to the East Street Circle at 128. That is not your typical bike path. The second thing I want to address is the process that the town has used. From the very beginning, the town has not been transparent about the full extent of this project because it knew the residents would be opposed. And they are. think it's important to give a few examples of why we are so upset. In March of 2021, there was a Zoom meeting held, because it was in the middle of the pandemic, to raise the topic with residents. At the meeting, we were told there would be, quote, many, many meetings with the residents so we could give input and have our questions answered. That's on tape, and it's on the town website. Many, many meetings. In spite of that, we heard nothing for 26 months. 26 months later, in April of this year, a letter was sent out inviting residents to a meeting at the library on May 16th. The letter stated that the agenda was to discuss, quote, a sidewalk along Canton Street. There was no mention of the shared use path. I wrote to several town officials at the time and asked them to send out a new letter that would accurately describe the project as a sidewalk and a shared use path, and to perhaps even mention the number of trees and stone walls that would be affected. The town refused to do that. At the May meeting, we were told that the 25% plans would be posted on the town website within a week or two, and they were. But keep in mind, there were not a lot of residents and abutters at the meeting because the letter just said it was about a sidewalk, and who could be opposed to a sidewalk? It did not raise concern on most people's part. So when the plans were posted, I wrote to the town again and asked them to notify residents in writing about the availability of the plans on the town website because so many people were not at the meeting. I was concerned that most people were not aware, and it became clear that most people on Canton Street were not aware of the plans. So I made that request, and the town again refused. In June, several residents got together and asked that the trees that would be affected be marked so that we could see the full extent of the project. We feared that it would be huge, but we weren't really sure. On the plans that were posted, some trees that were to be removed were marked removed, and in some other places it said clearing and grubbing. So it wasn't clearly articulated in the plans how many trees would be removed, but according to our calculation, it would be hundreds. So the town again refused to mark the trees. As you can see from the lawn signs that line Canton Street and the 604 signatures on the petition, an overwhelming majority of residents are opposed to this project. It would make Canton Street look like University Ave, lots of concrete and telephone poles. We strongly urge the state to withdraw approval for this project. It would result in the waste of federal and state financial resources and also our natural resources along Canton Street. Please do not destroy our street so that Westwood can get a free sidewalk. Thank you.
This ought to be fun. Brian Olson, O-L-S-O-N, 83 Canton Street. I own about 300 feet of frontage on Canton Street. Todd, great job on your presentation, what you said. I will take issue with one thing. I think there was 43 out of 45, because I was the one that said, yeah, I like it. And look, just hear me out a little bit. And I don't like the whole thing, let's put it. But I think, I don't think Canton Street will ever look like University Ave. I do think that I've been in areas that have been redeveloped like this, you know, with the sidewalks on both sides or the bike path, whatever it is. And they, you know, I think you can still maintain the character. It's all about how you do it. I also, my biggest worry, I guess, is if we revise too much, we don't get a chance to have a sidewalk. And the sidewalk, to me, is just all about safety. I have my kids grew up, you know, not being able to walk to Downey School because we had no way to get there. We were half a mile away. I think kids live 2 houses down from us, and my kids didn't even know them until they went to school because you couldn't walk from my house 2 houses down without worrying about the kids getting killed. So the safety for us, my wife and I, my wife is here, is the big thing. And, you know, I feel like there are ways to do this. I do think that the street is further away from my house when this is done than closer. I think that's not correct because the street is going to be narrower when all is said and done. The sidewalk is going to be there, but not the street. I do think that I do have a concern about the stone walls. Looking at the plans very closely, it looks like, based on what I saw, the stone walls are going to be moved, not gotten rid of. But I think that's a really important thing because I do think that makes Canton Street have a different character. I really do. I think those old stone walls that are there are just beautiful. So I do worry about that. But I guess my feeling is, and now I know I'm in the majority here, I knew driving down Canton Street with all the signs at everyone's house except mine, I understand other people's concerns, though, let's put it that way. I do understand it, and I think I just want to make sure we have the opportunity to get these funds and do something that's going to be safe. You know, the whole idea of the bike, I think you're right about the bike path connecting two places that don't really matter, don't need to be connected. I do think the walking part of it is really important, and even walking on both sides of the street, but I guess there are ways to cut across at different places if there was a sidewalk. So I just don't want you to think that everyone's completely against this, and I don't want that many trees cut down. There are going to be some cut down, but as the person from the bike thing from the town said, we should be putting back way more trees than, if we're going to cut down a mature tree, we should put back way more trees than we cut down to make it look really nice. Because it does. I think it is a nice street, but it's not going to be University Ave if this is done. And I don't think it will ever be done with the plans that are in place. And I know Todd has pretty much told us that, hey, if the town can come together and figure out something that works, we can do it. And I worry about losing that money so that we can get the safety of the sidewalks.
My name's Sean Keeney. I'm representing my mother's estate, and I'm going to be moving into the house at 396 Canton Street. I can only look at the plans that you have right here, and there are a couple things that just aren't adding up. One of which is current rock wall is about 3 feet off of the road, about 2 feet wide, and you're moving it back about 25 feet at my house. So I can say that that's 30 feet that you're moving back the line, and that's not where the easement's going, so you have to be moving it onto my property. You're also, with the cutback, you're doing an additional cutback at my property so that you can cut down an additional 4 mature trees that my father put in the Carter administration, and that were designed to block the road. But they're not even given the opportunity of being called trees on this plan. It just kind of looks like a bush, so that you don't have to do anything there. And that's just, it's not seeming to add up. And the other thing I would say is, I would hope that at the next meeting that we hold this at the high school, because holding it here makes about as much sense as those calming zones.
Hi, I'm Amy Yale, Y-A-L-E. As we can all see, there is a lot of passion in this room tonight. I live right off of Canton Street on Hedgerow, and I am 100% a proponent of making Canton Street a safer road. I'm also very aware that I only stand to benefit from this project, but I can empathize with the residents, the abutters, who will experience both the positive and negative impacts, the latter with which you've already heard a lot about tonight. So this is directed at you, the state representatives that are here. As you've heard, we, the surrounding neighborhoods, the Canton Street residents, and the broader community are nearly unanimous in our desire for a sidewalk in order to make the street safer for walkers, bikers, and drivers trying to navigate around said walkers and bikers. It's the current design and the state's requirements for a bi-directional bike facility and a pedestrian facility on both sides of the road that's being called into question. So we do understand that you have requirements, including standard widths that you have to adhere to in order to fund a project like this. But we want to know if you would entertain a possibility of flexing, given the fact that Canton Street is a designated scenic road, and the environmental impact on this project will likely be very high. Is there a world where you would consider funding only a multi-use path on one side of the street that could be used by both pedestrians and bikers? This would make the Westwood community safer, which should be our #1 goal, and of course lessen the overall impact on the street and the residents from the easements to the tree removals, etc. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Good evening and thank you for your time. I'm Gary Yesalian, 9 Adams Street. Get your pens ready. It's Yessalian. So I grew up in town and I'm also an avid cyclist. I'm against this design, this proposed design for a number of reasons. 1 is process, 2 is safety, 3 is it's very unappealing. I'm not going to go through the process because Shelley Reaver articulated that quite well. I want to go through the safety. I don't believe it's a safe design. The shared use path, which is really a 3rd lane, is 10 feet wide and has no mitigations for speed, no mitigations for e-bikes or electric personal transport vehicles, nor mitigations for 4-wheeled vehicles. When asking the design team about mitigations, none were offered. After much inquiry, speed recommendations are 20 miles an hour. For cyclists, this is a training speed that is unsafe under any conditions for reaction time. The 3rd lane cuts across over 50 driveways. This is a safety hazard for the user as well as the homeowner when trying to ingress and egress from Canton Street. Their focus will be on the cars on Canton Street, not on the people using that 3rd lane or the shared use path. Guy wires are being proposed in people's front yards. Those are going to extend from the utility poles into the yards. 1, it's unsightly. 2, it's a safety hazard when, playing in the yard or using lawn equipment. Excuse me. The wires themselves are safety hazards. Lastly, it's an unappealing design. But I want to move forward with the recommendation. We do not want Canton Street to be the cut-through from the interchange to the rotary because of the interchange design on 95 and 128 in the future. We can do a thoughtful design that keeps the traffic coming from Dedham Street up Canton Street and instead diverts it onto University Ave and onto the highways where it belongs. If we do that, we can use the funding to have less cars travel on Canton Street, and we'd have a safer road, and we can put a sidewalk in. That would eliminate the shared use path and creating the safety hazards and ruining the bucolic setting that we have. So I want to thank you for your time, and I'm going to submit this, my comment.
Thank you. My name is Steve Rafsky, R-A-F-S-K-Y. I do live on Canton Street. I thought I was going to come in this evening and see a lot of people I knew, but since there's so many I don't know, I want to just first introduce myself a little bit. I moved to town 35 years ago. Within 30 days of moving in town, I found out that what I thought was preserved town was now going to be developed behind my house. It's the N-Star project. We got the neighborhood together, we worked things out, and turned it into a very good project for the town and for the neighborhood. I later got on the planning board, and I served either planning board or economic development for 30 years in the town. I chaired the University Station redevelopment project. For the record, I think the first time the fire department came in to say we had too many people in the room was that meeting. And I think this fire department was much better tonight because we had to go outside. I chaired economic development, I chaired the acquisition of the Low Woods project, and I could go on. But what I've done in my 30 years of activity, and by the way, I retired, is I always looked for a process that brought residents and planning and granting authorities together. I've worked with many of our residents, with neighbors, I've worked with town officials, I've worked with town staff, I've worked with state officials. I have always found that people are willing to work together, and that's what I came up here to ask for. I think we need a better process. I have spoken to many neighbors. For the record, I might be only the second person on Canton Street that does not have a sign. The reason I don't have a sign is because I do believe having those signs don't meet our bylaw. But that being said, I am an advocate for you having those signs. But as someone who served on the planning board, when we put in the sign bylaw, I struggle with what to do. For 25 years, we have said that we're going to find a way to put a sidewalk on Canton Street and keep the character of the street what it is today. That has been a promise of this town. We also said that we would work with federal, state, and county officials. Canton Street is a county way, and get that result done. My question to this group is, why can't that happen now? Why can't you and us get a committee together, as we've done so many times, put a process in place that's collaborative, get people to understand what we're doing, and see if collectively we can get to a yes for everybody. That's my ask. I also want to thank Todd as well. I've worked with Todd over the years. It's a tough job. When I stood up and proposed putting retail and residential on University Avenue, I thought I was going to be tarred and feathered. But what I did learn, people who argued with me, criticized me after we saw the project, and it's because we listened to you, people called to thank us. And that's what I'd like to see happen here. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrew Shaba. I had a few questions for the design team and the DPW that are, judging by the overwhelming support of this, maybe moot, but just a few quick things. So what will the procedure be for trash collection during and after construction? Has anyone thought of that with the shared lane going past the driveway? Does it have to go past the shared lane, or does it stay in the driveway? Is new trash collection equipment required? Okay, so it'll be at the end of the driveway, or it'll be at over the shared lane? Okay, I didn't know if it was something that had any thought to it. I wouldn't think so. So the person will have to go to the shared lane, deposit the trash receptacle, and then return it afterwards. Okay. What is the procedure, if any, for home inspections prior to and during construction to ensure that any property which is damaged through either vibrations or some other sort of means are repaired and replaced in kind? Yeah, I believe that would be a state question. I'm assuming you guys have something planned out for that. So when construction is taking place, what are the measures in order to control vibration and to monitor it in residents' homes who are nearby to the work? Things like dust mitigation. Say a resident's home or vehicle gets covered in dust from construction activities. It's a messy job. What exactly is the procedure for the person whose home is affected to have their things repaired and replaced?
MassDOT has provisions in place during construction for dust control, and also, the vibrations. The contractor is, they're aware of, what they have to follow the provisions that are in the contract, and so they have all liability and all that. So.
I understand they have the liability of that, but what I'm saying is if you're a resident in this town and you're not involved in the construction industry and you live in a house around it and your house is damaged or your house is made dusty because the site measures aren't done properly, which happens in construction, How is that person compensated for that?
There's provisions in the contract for that.
What are the provisions of the contract?
The contractor's responsible.
But it's your contract that the contractor signs, correct?
It's MassDOT's contractor is responsible.
Okay, but we don't know what the provisions are. Those will be made public to the people at the time this work takes place?
If they did damage, then they would be responsible.
Okay, so there's no monitoring done to the homes or no survey done to the interior, the exterior of the homes prior to the start of construction?
If the contractor feels that the vibrations would be any threat to anybody's house, then it would be up to them to do their own survey.
Okay, so then it's not put in your specifications the contractor is going to be required to do any sort of pre-construction survey on the abutting residences?
It depends on the activities.
No, but I'm saying that's not in your standard contracts. They don't have to follow that. We're leaving it up to their discretion.
Just for typical excavation? No. If there was blasting involved?
No, I understand that there might be some blastings. It looks like there's some ledge on the university area, so there probably is going to be some blasting, which will in fact, but what are they? Do we know them? What are the provisions for the monitoring? Okay, and then what about dust mitigation? I understand that, but if the contractor doesn't mitigate the dust, if the contractor does not mitigate the dust and it causes damages to a resident's home, how is the resident compensated?
Can we get back to you?
Yeah, sure, that's fine. I'm going to follow up with all these questions in writing. I'm assuming you'll be able to respond to them when you look at your standard contract.
Yeah, you can email
You guys
us,
are
please.
responsible for it. I'm happy to do so.
Thank you.
What's going to be the delivery method for this project? Is it Chapter 30? Or is it pre-qualification or just?
It's a statewide transportation improvement program project.
Okay, is it bid under Chapter 30? Okay, and then is it going to be pre-qualification for contractors because of the size?
Yes.
And do you have any contractors that well, actually you just put out that solicitation. Okay, that's fine. And then the last thing is, there's a few areas on University that look very, very steep. Is there a way to make those safe and accessible for the handicap? I believe is the 5% slope required by MAAB. Will all of those be made safe for elderly and handicapped persons, or will you need to seek an exemption for some of them because of the existing topography?
Yeah, there's going to be a need for a variance potentially because there is a provision that if the surrounding terrain is steeper than the allowable slopes, that therefore there's an exemption to it matches the surrounding topography, but we're going to do everything we can at design to make sure that the slopes are met to the extent practical.
Okay, so essentially you can't get it the slope that's safe for a handicapped person, but you'll get an exemption so that we don't have to make it accessible for the handicapped.
On that steepest portion of the slope, correct?
Oh, understand. All right.
Yeah, technically feasible.
It's not feasible, but we're spending a lot of money here. I mean, there's some elderly folks here. I'm assuming some of them will be in wheelchairs soon. I just want to make sure they can get down to University Ave. Thank you.
Hi, Chris Murphy, M-U-R-P-H-Y, live in 39 Birch Street. We moved here in 2015, so we've lived here for 8 years. Hope to be here for another 42, make it an even 50. 2 young kids at home. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-month-old, so apologies if these thoughts are completely incoherent. It is lack of sleep that is doing that. Also want to give a shout out to the couple of families I saw here. It is extremely difficult for us to get out of the house, and props to my wife for handling the bedtimes. So thank you for those that did come, appreciate that. Do want to just extend my support for the project and the safety that it would provide. I've lived here, as I said, for 8 years, and when I was just a young married man with no children, I would run down Canton Street to connect to different areas, and that was probably a poor choice. I no longer do that with my children, and we would love to do that in the future. I've spoken to families who attend daycare on the street. They would love to be able to not drive to daycare, but they can't do that. They're also not here for aforementioned reasons. So do want to shout out to that. Also, in terms of the bike lane accessibility, it certainly doesn't seem like an obvious connecting route on the face of it, but I do want to put in people's minds that sometimes those things can give a little bit of momentum to people. I heard a comment one time where someone said, I never see people driving across the Charles River, so I guess we shouldn't build any bridges. And that's kind of how we feel about bike lanes. It's just totally unsafe to bike anywhere in that area, and it would be great to have something to connect that. I commute down to the train station, and I can't do that any other way than a car, which adds to the traffic. I don't think anyone wants me in my car, lack of sleep, driving down early in the morning. So finally, just want to close and say thank you guys so much for your work, and thank you for everyone here for the collaboration. Honestly, when I saw all the signs in the street, I figured this would be a very negative meeting, and I'm loving to see all the people's thoughts and all the willingness to work together. So thank you.
My name is Mark Hickar, Hichar. I live at 549 Canton Street, and I've lived there for over 30 years. My wife and I have raised 2 young children from preschool through high school at that address. And I also bicycle regularly on Canton Street during the spring through the fall. I am opposed to the project. I'm not opposed to a sidewalk consistent with other areas, other sidewalks in the area, but not this project, which includes the mixed-use path. This project appears to be driven by the availability of state funds, not by a consideration of what the town residents want and need. And especially not with a consideration of the concerns for those who actually live on Canton Street. Todd, I do want to say thank you for all the work you've done. You've been a very gracious leader in this, and I do appreciate your voice in this process. That said, though, I think that to the extent this project involves the mixed-use path, it would make the street more dangerous. As was said by another speaker, given the several residential driveways that open up to Canton Street, and given the heavy traffic on Canton Street, cars attempting to enter the traffic are going to either have to drive onto the path, blocking the path, or else they'll have to dart across the path in order to get into the flow of the traffic, which moves, as was said earlier, I think by you as well, that moves over the stated speed limit. So you really have to dart across that path if it's built to get into traffic. It's not a safe situation, but it doesn't make sense to begin with. I bicycle on Canton Street. That's one of the speakers just before me was saying the slope is above the required slope for paths. It's a brutal hill. You're not going to find, I'm certain there are people in this room far fitter than I am, but it is a tough hill to navigate. You're not going to have young children navigating that from University Ave up there. It's just, it doesn't make sense on Canton Street to build the bike path there, except the time when you see bikers there are when I bike there, and there are some others there, early in the morning on Saturday morning and Sunday when there's no traffic. But there are other streets in Westwood that are far in greater need of a bike path: Gay Street, Dover Road, 109, than Canton Street. And as already been stated, the project would involve the removal of dozens and dozens of trees and dozens of stone walls that give Canton Street its character. And while the town has said that it has a goal of replacing the trees and a goal of replacing all of the stone walls, to my knowledge, there's been no firm commitment in that respect. And even if the trees are replanted, Canton Street won't have the appearance that it does today, at least not in my lifetime or the lifetime of many of those in this room. As has been mentioned in the presentation, Canton Street has been designated a scenic road under Massachusetts law, Chapter 40, Section 15C. This law prohibits the cutting or removal of trees or the tearing down or destruction of stone walls or portions thereof, except with prior written consent of the planning board.
While the planning board may have the power to allow the removal of trees and destruction of stone walls in some circumstances, it is clearly the policy of the Commonwealth not to allow this absent exceptional circumstances. And in my view, for the town planning board to allow it for this project would be arbitrary and capricious. This project is unnecessarily large, unnecessarily destructive, and would needlessly destroy the character of the road. Further, the trees designated to be removed, to the extent they are within the boundaries of the public way, and most are public shade trees, within the meaning of that term in Massachusetts law, Chapter 87, Section 1. Such trees are accorded special protections under Massachusetts law, as you know. And again, while the town may have the legal authority to remove public shade trees under certain circumstances, to allow that for the purposes of this project would also be arbitrary and capricious. Again, the project is needlessly destructive. Finally, the project has, as has already been mentioned, inadvertently or not, the town has not been transparent. In several notices of various meetings, and currently on the town website, this project is referred to as the Canton Street Sidewalk Project, or similar wording. Again, my issue is not with the sidewalk. It's the whole project involving the mixed-use path. The town's website refers to the March 1, 2021 presentation as the Canton Street Sidewalk Presentation. The March 1, 2021 meeting is described as the Canton Street Sidewalk Design Meeting. The May 16, 2023 presentation is referred to as the Canton Street Sidewalk Presentation, and the 25% plan is referred to as the Canton Street Sidewalk 25% Design Plan. And so this isn't about the sidewalk, it's about the project and the mixed use, and primarily the mixed-use path. In summary, I'm opposed to the Canton Street redesign project as planned, which includes the mixed-use path. The project would result in the needless destruction of trees and stone walls, some of which are over 100 years old. It would eliminate the scenic character of the street and make the street, in fact, more dangerous for residents living on the path side. Thank you all for listening.
Good evening. My name is John Harding. I live at 148 Forbes Road, which is one of these streets that directly leads into Canton Street. I oppose the project in its current form for the reasons that the prior speaker and many others have stated, so I'm not going to repeat those. What I think is important to understand, specifically with respect to traffic, is the long history that people went through to try to improve traffic conditions in this area, particularly in light of the University Station project. Literally from about 2005 to 2016, myself and numerous other residents working with people like Mr. Rafsky were concerned about what the impact of traffic would be coming up Dedham Street onto Canton Street in light of the University Station project. Literally years and years were spent trying to find a solution. I can't tell you how many meetings I went to over the issue of what the intersection of University Ave and Canton Street should look like. And residents pulled together and came together many meetings in this very room where we went over plans to address ways in which we could mitigate the existing traffic problems on Canton Street and the surrounding streets. Now, a result of that was that there was a lawsuit brought by abutters of the University Station project, one of the issues being the traffic concerns. And as a result of that, we got the developer to give the town a pot of money of about $2.5 million to put up traffic mitigation measures throughout the area, including many, many on Canton Street. So if you drive down Canton Street, the little mini islands that you see, the ways in which the road has been reconfigured and altered and the lines painted in certain ways, was the main purpose of that was to discourage speeding down that street. My understanding from this existing plan is that you're going to rip out a lot of those mitigation measures that we worked for 10 years to get in place, and they have been very successful. Everyone's very concerned about the impact that the slip ramp will have once that opens, as well as just general increases in traffic. And putting this project in place that essentially opens up Canton Street is just going to encourage more traffic at higher rates of speed as people, instead of turning down University Ave from the exiting the slip ramp, are going to go up Canton Street. And sidewalks are a great idea. We were the beneficiaries on Forbes of a, I think it's Safe Schools project, and a sidewalk was put in. I'll have to say, I don't think many of the kids walked to Downey on it. They take the bus, but in any event, it was great, but they didn't have to have the level of disruption that's being proposed here. But in any event, sidewalks are no guarantee of safety. Many people might have seen earlier this week, there was an incident in Lynn where a speeding car jumped the curb and struck a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old who were on their way to elementary school. So we have to take into account whether this project would in fact worsen traffic, worsen speed, encourage more vehicles up through the Canton Street corridor as being equally important to the safety considerations and making sure that if you put sidewalks in and kids are out there waiting, whether it be waiting for the school bus or walking to Downey or anywhere else, that we haven't created an environment that encourages more speeding, more cars, particularly where we worked for over 10 years to try to get things under control. We saw dramatic improvements from these mitigation efforts. So I would just like the people involved in this, you need to weigh all of the factors, and safety certainly involves the traffic conditions in the area and not doing anything that's going to make those worse. Thank you.
Bob Ross is the name. I live at 25 Forbes Road. It's off of Canton Street. I have a few questions. Oh, I'm sorry. They can't hear me. Okay. I have a few questions. How the guardrails closest to the roundabout at the end of Canton Street, I'm sure you're aware of it, the engineer. Just a couple months ago, it was only 10, the guardrails were going to be pushed back 10 feet. Oh, we found out two weeks ago, tomorrow, they're going to be pushed back 25 feet. And the homeowners are outraged, okay, on Metcalf about this. Never mind all the wetlands that's going to have to be filled in. So there's a miscommunication. I think it's done deliberately. Always keep adding a little information, okay? It's not fair to the residents. Not fair at all. As far as traffic mitigation, I propose a solution for at least half the traffic that transits Canton Street. I think University Ave and Canton Street, with the intersection there was a proposal done 10 years ago. John is aware of it, where much of the traffic would be diverted off of Canton Street onto, forgive me, no, not University Ave. University Ave is a commercial street. There are no homes on it, okay? And you could easily widen it if necessary. It's a very wide street. I think you people ought to look into that to mitigate the traffic. It's outrageous. I did a traffic count this week. I got nothing else to do apparently this week, okay? I did a traffic count on Canton Street. 9,500 cars, despite what this man said, only 8,000, all right? And the DPW director said 2 or 3 months ago the traffic was going to get very, very heavy. Well, apparently that's double or triple. So let's do the math. 95 times 3, it's 28,000 cars. It's too many. The street can barely handle it now. So traffic mitigation can be, you ought to spend the money on traffic mitigation first, solving the traffic mitigation problem. And I represent some people that have been in the neighborhood for 65 years, all right? They're not in favor of any sidewalk, okay? And people are entitled to their opinion. Some people want a sidewalk for some reasons, what have you. But I'm not in favor. It's going to be a nightmare to transit that street, okay, with the additional traffic. And this is another thing that, for some reason, the project managers, the town, they have a propensity to spend a lot of money, but they can't tell us how many trees are going to come down, even an initial estimate. Well, I did my homework, okay? Going on their standard of 10 feet back on, I think it's the east side, and 6 foot on the west side where the alleged sidewalk would be, okay? We're talking 1,000 trees. That's not counting the additional 10 feet setback that was supposed to be on the guardrail, okay? The guardrail by the roundabout. Now it's 25 feet. There's going to be additional trees to be cut down there too. And nobody's told us why they're going back 25 feet. Well, I know why. I stand corrected. Another lane. Okay? Another lane. Another traffic lane. Okay? So what's the game?
You misinterpreted my answer to that question. The 25 feet is where the grading limit will go.
Okay. Yes, but...
The 10 feet is for the shared use path.
Yes, but you're widening the road too, right?
The road will not need to be widened.
Well, okay. Then you should be more explicit. Anyway, 25 feet is more than enough. Plus, on the other side of the guardrail, there's a natural gas pumping station, okay? And 25 feet will put it pretty very close to the building that's there, okay? And as far as the stone walls, if and when this project ever goes through, which hope it doesn't, or it's canceled, killed, or whatever, those stone walls, if assuming the project went through, the stone walls that are currently on people's property should be saved and brought back and restacked. Okay? I don't care how much money it costs. You can find money within 21 million, okay, to do it. All right? Because I know the type of walls DOT builds to replace old walls, and they're not what people have now. Okay? Thank you very much.
The name is Hassan Yeager, Hasenjaeger, Forbes Road. I was asked to speak about the general community impact. Projects like this, 1 mile sidewalk with a bike path, $20.4 million, 12 state executives here showing up for a meeting. There's something big going on. This isn't about a sidewalk. People in the audience may not have heard of Chapter 40A. Chapter 40A is a big push by the state government of Massachusetts to create extensive, affordable, and migrant housing at all MBTA and railroad stops. Communities that have these rail stations are going to be required to have a special zone so that reconstruction and new construction can occur to create these housing projects. One of the things you would need for Westwood Station to expand extensive housing is sidewalks. They want connectivity to the neighborhoods. So these gentlemen, I don't know if they live in Westwood, but this neighborhood, let's say, of my assessment, 500 homes, the vast majority are $1.5 million or higher in value. All those residents are subject to a tremendous hit on their property values. If there's any significant new multi-housing multi-use development in their area. What's contradictory is this is kind of the jewel neighborhood of Westwood. And it's got traffic warming, it's got speed bumps, it's got all the design and aesthetics to have a quiet family neighborhood. Every home in a family neighborhood doesn't have to have a jogging path in front of it, doesn't have to have a bicycle path in front of it. Within 10 miles of here, there's probably 100 bicycle paths and 200 walking facilities. Kids don't walk to school. Go to the elementary school in the morning or in the afternoon and see the line of 200 cars waiting for each child. When towns try to get kids to walk to school, they find out they have to purchase sidewalk plowing equipment to deploy all over the sidewalks. That becomes a huge expense. But back to the neighborhood. It seems that there isn't transparency. I do not believe that there would be the concern from the state to have all these executives here regarding a sidewalk. This is way more than a sidewalk going on here. If you wanted to protect this neighborhood, and these people have a right to have this neighborhood protected from any further development of Westwood Station or the industrial park, anything coming across from Dedham Street or University Ave. So there's a lot of issues that I think are undercover, and I'm concerned about government in general and Massachusetts government in general, the way things are done. You have a meeting at a library on a Zoom call, and the next thing you know, there's a project and you're 25% done, and we're just deciding when we're going to let the public know about it drip by drip. So I think this project is dead. The traffic, if you look at it, the dead-end sidewalk from one end to the other, what's this all about? And it's about requirements to have a big impact on mixed-use housing going in to the train station area and enhance all the development that's going to take place there. If you really wanted to help the neighbors and help the traffic here, you'd probably put a cul-de-sac down there before University Ave and have a turnaround. So we appreciate the chance to talk here, but I don't think, if you're thinking this is 25% done, I think you're wrong. I think this has to be completely rethought from ground zero. Thank you.
My name is Mike Lowney, L-O-W-N-E-Y. I'm at 284 Canton Street. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm opposed to the plan as it is. I'm opposed to a shared use path. When I moved here about 10 years ago, and I kind of heard rumblings of a sidewalk, and I have 5 kids, so I'd love to have a sidewalk so I could walk, right to school. Sidewalk would be great. I thought that kind of what this was, and then over the past few months, I kind of got a little more educated with it and realized what it is. My biggest reason why everyone here wants a sidewalk. I don't think I want a shared use path, and I just don't think it's going to be safer. I think the thought is it's going to be safer to have this, but my true opinion is it's not going to be safer. You can put a sidewalk right in front of my house. I'm fine with that, but putting a shared use path, like this one guy talked about it, get it out of my driveway as it is, it's tricky with 10,000 cars come by. Having another lane, whether it's on my side or the other side, to have to go across, like you said, you're gonna have to jet out. There's over 50 driveways. And it's 1.9 miles, but it's really like 1.5 miles of actual where the residents live. So you have 50-something driveways. I mean, if you're a bike, and every I don't know how much feet that is, you're gonna be having to it's just not gonna be safer. I just really don't think it's gonna be safer for bikes going, especially if they're going 20 miles an hour or whatever it is. And if the comment is, well, there's not gonna be that many bikes, then why are we doing it anyways? If there's not gonna be that many bikes, then you don't really need them. So I really don't think it's going to be safer at all. I think you'd have more accidents. I mean, I don't know how many accidents are on the street now, or deaths. I don't know how many accidents are on the street now. I've lived there and I haven't really heard of it. Besides my house. My house, someone came and took out the whole. We used to have a fence in front of our house, but not anymore. But so I don't know how many accidents, but you're going to have way more accidents with bikers, people having to like look. I don't think it's gonna be safer to have a shared use path. That's my opinion. I was trying to figure out, like, I looked on the Mass site about shared use paths, and I'm like, our street just does not seem like a place to have a bike path, like for multiple reasons. People said, especially the slope. I didn't even realize that because I'm not a biker, so the slope and all that. But when I looked, it's like, I mean, there's pictures that they show of places where the bike paths. It's like it's nothing like a residential street that we have with 53 driveways. It's just they're at the rail trail in Framingham by the rail line. They're like by rail lines, Cape Cod Canal, Amtrak Vermont line. All these bike paths, that shared use paths that are on the MassGov. They're in like by trains and the river trail. Where's this one? The Connecticut Riverwalk Bikeway in Springfield. The Riverwalk, like those are beautiful bike paths. Like that's what I think of bike. Like our street, and you guys drive down it, is 50. It's probably. I mean, who knows how many houses are on? At least probably 100 maybe. It's not like a place where you put a bike path. It's just so. I just don't think it would. I definitely don't think it would be safer, and it just doesn't seem like it's the real intended use. I think, it's not really wanted. I mean, there's 100 people, 100 houses about on this street, and I think 2 people said they were for it, or not for it, but for a sidewalk. So you're going to have 100 people, 100 households that are not going to be happy for a couple of years while this is being done. Never mind, you got to get all these. You said you have to get like easements and right of ways and things. I don't think everyone's going to be like, yeah, let's do this. It's gonna be a not pleasant thing, and none of the abutters want it. It's not like if it was, well, maybe there's 1 or 2, but 1% of the abutters want it, right? It's one thing if it's like there's one guy who doesn't want to do this. There's like 100 people, like every single person on this thing doesn't really want it almost. So it just doesn't make sense to me why this is all pushing through. One word that I thought was pretty telling on it, it called it a corridor on the thing that I was reading, and to me that's not what Canton Street is, a corridor. It's scenic drive. I'm not a transportation expert, but a corridor to me sounds like a pathway from one place to another. And my fear is that this is, I don't think it's like some conspiracy thing, but I think it's going to be like, a lot of people in this slip thing that's coming off by a Gulf. I feel like a lot of people are going to come through there. And it's a corridor, and you're going to go through it. It's going to be this brand new road with I think that's, not what the intended desire of Canton Street is, a scenic drive with the canopy trees and the stone wall. It's going to become a corridor. Again, I think that's good by like a riverway or an industrial area or by a railroad track, but not in like a residential, area like this. I think that this is, we're using, I don't like using town money. I love the idea. I love the ingenuity of trying to find a way to make this happen. But I don't think we should do it I don't think we should throw in this shared use path just to get the sidewalk. I want a sidewalk. I love my kids. My kids ask me all the time if they can walk through. I'm like, no, it's too dangerous. But to just do this and to disrupt so many abutters for something we really actually, most people don't really want the shared use path. They want the sidewalk. But to throw that in there to get the money just doesn't seem right to me, especially when there's so many people that don't want it. was reading somewhere the other day that like Westwood got like so many millions of dollars free money or something. Was it 11? So I'm like, couldn't we use that money to put a sidewalk instead of having to get the 20 million to do a shared path and sidewalk? And I don't know how that stuff works, but I just read that, and you guys might be able to figure it out. My worry is about people cutting through. I think we should try to put a sidewalk, if we can use that money, or try to do some, maybe lower the speed limit. I don't think it needs to be so fast on the street. Maybe like, I know on Everett they have the speed humps. I think speed humps would be nice in certain areas to slow things down. Because I think if you're going to try to slow everything down, so that way Waze doesn't find us as a cut through, because that will make it more dangerous. So, anyways, those are some of my thoughts on it. But I do appreciate you guys giving us time. I appreciate all Todd's work. Todd's been very respectful and very good throughout this whole process. But I'm opposed to a shared use path.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Cirillo, Cirillo. I live on Porter Street, and I know I'm a minority today, but I want to say that I'm very supportive of this project. I have 3 children. They're teenagers. We have never been able to cross Canton Street. I still fear for their safety. I feel like a sidewalk and a shared use path would be just a benefit for the community. I think about, my children weren't able to walk to Downey or go to the playground, having connectivity with Forbes and others. I mean, the gentleman before me talked about a corridor. I don't view the shared use as just one from East Street to Canton to University Ave. I view it as connecting the community. This will allow us to go to Islington. It will allow me to commute downtown and go to Route 128 station. I think it's a wonderful idea. The one thing that I have concerns about is the speed of the traffic. I do think it's going to be a cut through. I would like to see maybe some 4-way stop signs, a few more crosswalks. I'd like to see some more traffic mitigation to make it safer for the bicyclists and pedestrians. Thank you.
Enkelida Close, member of Bike and Pedestrian Safety Committee for almost 14 years. Also resident in Beacon Street for 15 plus years. I am a mother of 2 children, 18 and 6. And I would like to give them the option for, if they don't want to use a car, they can walk, they can bike safely everywhere, especially when they have friends over on the other side of the town. I live in Islington area, and I've seen it all, the whole process of how each member, and many of them, they are very well-known faces, and we know them for many years. The East Street Bridge, for example, was quite a challenging project for almost 30 years that the community did not really foresee what was happening, but they just now are really embracing the benefits of a safe area, a safe bridge, higher, with 2 sidewalks, give the opportunity to all the people who use the T station in a safe manner. There are statistics being told right now. I don't think East Street Bridge is anymore in local news weekly, or state news, or even international news, how the track goes under that bridge. It's safe. Also, personally, I love it, the scenery. Maybe I do see in Canton Street there is a huge potential that the scenery of this street cannot be damaged with a very thorough, holistic approach of the engineering team, as well as the landscape architect is key. And also the road data just came from all of you guys. That road data needs to become a little bit more frequent with the town, we thought, which has done an excellent job for any type of sidewalks we have seen, or even like the asphalt of the streets, that the car really smoothly drive compared with the other nearby towns. We have to have the same smooth transition for pedestrians. for our kids, for their safety. We may not be there all the time for them, to drive them for a play date, especially from the age 11 to 17 or 18. Speaking of some elderly people that may never had the privilege of driving, I speak on behalf of my parents, why they do not have an option to have a sidewalk to meet their friends on the sidewalk. Also, speaking of the housing, affordable housing, why our town is afraid of this concept. We like diverse people with diverse also income. Why should we be afraid of that? There is a good reason why the state put those guidelines for each towns that have been embracing. We need to work all together that we can, any given minute, we can see our elderly people, we can see somebody with ADA compliance that need those housing, even in Islington, everywhere. But particularly, Canton Street may not have to do anything with this kind of like a housing, but still we have to keep in mind that Islington, for any reason, it will be beneficial for everybody. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. My name is Sweta Mepani, M-E-P-A-N-I. I am a resident of Westwood for 28 plus years and live on Canton Terrace. So I'm in support of this project, primarily for the safety and for the connectivity to all the communities, from Downey, Islington, all of Canton Street down to University Avenue. And I have heard, a lot about the abutters, and I really empathize with their situation. But I do want to remind folks that everything that will happen to this project, there are a lot more people who are going to be impacted, not just the 45 families, not just the folks who have signed the 600 petition. While we might not have our front yard impacted, we will be impacted in our daily routine of what goes on during the construction. I would say that somebody mentioned that they haven't seen anybody walk to school. If you go down to if you come down to Downey School, where there are sidewalks, since there have been sidewalks, there have been a lot of children walking to school. I heard somebody mention that if the trees are taken off, we may not see them replanted or grow in our lifetime. We're not thinking about the downstream impact for our future generations. I also heard somebody say that in the May 16th or May 2023 meeting, I forget if it was the 16th, that there was no mention of this shared path. I was in the meeting. I actually want to thank this team because the designs at that time were well laid out, well planned, and really want to thank for making this an inclusive and collaborative effort here. There are many surrounding communities who don't really take that into consideration. They go out and they build or make changes. On that meeting, I do want to make it clear, I was in person and this plan that was presented today was there that day as well, and there was a clear shared path. What is disheartening to see is the signs that say no third lane, because that is misleading. There is no third lane. This is, no one was interrupted when they were speaking. So let me please speak. I'm just saying, I was there, I heard what was said, and I was in the meeting, and the plans have been up on the website that talk about a shared path. Somebody said it's misleading, it's called a Canton Street side street project. Well, similarly, there's no such thing as a third lane in this. And someone said, it's a scenic drive, so we want to preserve it. Yet, it's not scenic enough for a bike path. And a bike path doesn't end and start from, just the Rotary to University Avenue. There are a lot of people who are at the Dedham Corp train station who can ride their bikes and go other places as well. Again, it is really about connecting from Downey, Islington, all the way to these other, to the University Avenue side. My husband and I want to walk, and we walk, and just the few feet between Canton Terrace and Blue Hill is so dangerous. Just forget about allowing our children. We would never let our children out on those streets, either on bike or walking. So gentleman who spoke earlier, if you want to go 2 houses down, if you want to meet your neighbors, if you want to bike, you have to put your bike in the car, you have to put the kids in the car. So I really am in support for this, primarily for the safety of what this project brings to the town. And one thing that nobody has talked about is the infrastructure. We said 100 years old, and I want to ask if there's been a risk assessment done, to this infrastructure and what could happen in the next few years if this was not really addressed. So again, it is, yes, it's a very great opportunity to have the funding from the state. I think we should take advantage of it and use it to bring more safety to the street. It will be scenic. Another thing, somebody said that they asked about marked trees. I remember this team responding to that saying, we have a landscaper, a landscaping company, we have arborists, and once we work out the design plans, we will tell you how many trees, which trees. So I want to remind folks that this is earlier in the stage. This is why we're all here. 25% is not done. It's not 25% of the project that's done. It's 25% of the design, and we're here to really influence the 75% of the design before the execution starts. I had a few more points, but I think there's a lot of people waiting. One very important thing, it's great to hear everyone. I feel very strongly that tonight is skewed towards, against the project or just having a sidewalk. What is really unfortunate is on the May meeting, we had a real equal representation, and because maybe the timing or whatever it is, there were so many young families who were vocal about having this design for the safety, and those are missing here. So maybe the next meeting is, it's never going to work for everyone's time, but I really feel that this has been, the younger families are not here to represent themselves. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Lara Isa, E-A-S-A. I live on Blue Hill Drive. I just have a few points. One, I would like to echo the point that was just made before me, that I don't feel that this meeting is an adequate cross-section of our community, and I'm not sure what the reasoning for that is, but I would like to see more of the younger families represented in this group, and that their voice gets heard. I don't know if there's been outreach to them as well, included in like the 45 families or communities, households that you spoke to, but I would like to make sure that is noted. I do have a few questions, and one of them is, has a study been done on what the predicted bicycle usage would be and how it might change on Canton Street after this project? I know we don't have a lot of bikers now, only a handful, and I think a lot of that is due to the way that it's not really suitable as a safe biking road. Do we think that number would increase, or do we have plans to study that?
Yeah, we do not have a specific number on the number of people who will be biking on the road, but we do have a statewide map that correlates the residential areas with commercial and other destinations, temples, schools, and based on that, we have an assessment on the potential of people that will be walking or biking in the roadway, and we base our decisions on the type of infrastructure that we needed based on that. I don't have that specific number, but we can get back to you on the specific, where we have a residential area and commercial or restaurants. It's very likely that someone we want to provide the space for those folks to choose to walk or bike, not necessarily to drive, and to do it in a safe way. And that's mainly the reason behind the current project. But we can get back to you on the potential.
I think that would be great, and it doesn't have to be right away, but certainly maybe for a future meeting, it might ease folks' minds to understand, that the road is probably not going to be, looking like the Tour de France. It's going to be something much less than that, but probably not even to the extent that like the Minuteman pathway or some of the other bike trails look. So, you know, that may be beneficial to talk through to understand, you know, really the dangers of the driveway crossings.
If I could just expand on that for a second.
Sure.
So based on the 2022 data that MassDOT has compiled, I believe the roadways ranked as a medium potential for everyday biking and a medium potential for walkable trips. So the two categories that Francisco was referring to.
Okay, does medium have a numerical definition? I'm an engineer, I'm sorry.
It does, but I can't cite the specific
I can Google that later. Thank you.
Yeah, that formula takes into account environmental justice areas, residences where they don't have a means of transportation other than be on a car. But it also takes into account the likelihood that there are people who live there who would want to have another destination. So the closest that you are from a residence to a restaurant or commercial area is going to be higher versus lower. And the medium may be deceiving too, because the medium that you may have in Westwood may not be the same potential in terms of numbers that you may have in Western Mass or in Cambridge, closer to Boston. So it's adjusted also based on the region to take into account the potential number of people that would be using the infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Another question that I had was someone mentioned the electrical wires and the, you know, that those would be moved back. Was there any consideration in the study on moving the electrical underground as part of this initiative, like it is on some of the side streets in the area?
That would be considered participating cost, and that would have to come as a betterment from the town. That would not be eligible for federal reimbursement.
Okay. I would be curious if the town could put together some numbers on what that would cost. Not living on Canton Street, I know most of my power outages are due to the scenic tree limbs coming down on the power limbs. And so I think if we're doing this, it might be worth mitigating that a little bit.
There is required tree clearing, tree trimming when we're moving the utility poles back. So that would decrease the chances of trees falling on power lines.
Okay, so that would be better. And then finally, I guess I would just like to say I am overall in proponent of doing something along Canton Street. I am a runner and a biker in this community, and often I do use Canton Street as sparingly as I can to get from place to place. My husband and I love to go down to University and enjoy the restaurants, and I would love to actually have a longer route than to go down Blue Hill and cut that way. I'd love to be able to come all the way down Canton Street, get some exercise in, go out for dinner. So I would love to be able to do that with more safety and to be able to have that infrastructure in place for our future children. So that would be, I overall would like that. I did really love the idea that was thrown out earlier this evening of only doing one side and of doing the shared use path and maybe not the pedestrian sidewalk. I think personally, I will just speak as a runner, a lot of times a concrete sidewalk, they are harder on the knees and the joints. And also as a biker, they are obnoxiously loud and annoying when you're kind of running over the expansion joints. So I think that a shared use path would be more valuable if we had to pick one or the other, because it would get us that space that we need. And I would hate to see a sidewalk put in that's concrete and then to see runners and walkers kind of jumping into the breakdown lane to still be on asphalt. So that was going to be my last comment, but I'll wait. Did you?
Yeah, so I've listened to a lot of comments this evening, and I think it's a good time to come in and just talk a little about the shared use path in general. I mean, generally they are asphalt. Is that correct? Okay, so Yeah, so 90% of the time say that they're asphalt, you know, maybe there's a 10% chance somewhere that they're concrete, but, you know, looking at the contact sensitivity of the roadway, you know, I don't think that you would want concrete out there based on, you know, it has a nice rural scenic look to it, you know, being a scenic roadway, so, you know, the shared use path, I mean, I kind of like call it a glorified sidewalk, really. I mean, that's what I call it. Everybody, you know, in the designer's office, you know, they kind of whatever, they laugh at me or whatever, but you know, the main difference, you know, if you had a 5.5 foot, you know, standard asphalt sidewalk, right? I mean, really the only difference is that, you know, in terms of, you know, how it's built is that it is wider. It usually ranges from 8 to 10 feet, okay? And it's usually separated by like some kind of grass strip before the roadway, before the curb line. And, you know, we do that, you know, just to, you know, to kind of create that separation. I don't know, I mean, in residential areas, I mean, Francisco, you know, does the shared use path, I think a lot of times we see them like with a stripe that down the middle. I mean, is that something that like in a thickly settled residential area that like, is that like something that can be discussed or, you know, like something like that to be waived? You know, I'm only saying that because of being a residential location as opposed to being out somewhere out on a rail trail somewhere where, you know, whatever, the stripe is usually there.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely something that we can consider, not to implement that stripe in the middle. Certainly 8 to 10 feet is probably the minimum that we want to have to allow for someone who's walking to be passed by someone who's walking faster, or if you're having a conversation with someone else and someone is coming in the other direction, you have enough space. And similarly with someone who is biking, the intent of having the shared spot is not for the person who is very comfortable already riding on Canton Street. We feel that they will continue to ride on the street, and with the traffic calming measures, there will be an opportunity for them to be at a less speed differential than the motor vehicles. The intent of the shared spot is for the children that are more comfortable to ride on a sidewalk, very likely 7-8 miles an hour that they will be riding, and not necessarily the high-speed people. But 8 to 10 feet, and certainly the pavement markings that are noted is something that we can discuss with our traffic group to figure out a way to have some context sensitivity for the project and not being appealing like or appearing like a third lane that is the last thing that we want to implement.
Thank you.
If we got into a design, if we progressed into a design that was a pure discussion about integrating just a shared use path, I think as a community we want to have some valid discussions and levels of inclusiveness to see, would we prefer it to be concrete, would we prefer it to be asphalt? There are tints and tones of concrete that you can make it more of a subtle, more of a scenic feel. You can tint it beige. You don't have to have it be a solid gray color. But I think this is something that is, again, like an option perhaps, but let's just try to like keep the convo going right now a little bit.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. That's all I had.
So just, you know, and just follow up one more thing.
This is going to be short and sweet.
Okay. All right, here you go.
Craig Runcie, 8 Spelman Road, Westwood. I abut Canton Street. We do not want this project.
No, I was just really just trying to follow up and just say that, you know, that when you have an asphalt shared use path, it's really, that separation of grass, from the roadway, and, of course, remember that the street doesn't have a curb line too, and I know that a lot of you are concerned about speed, and, in my opinion, in terms of the reducing speed on the roadway, I mean, the road could be narrower. It doesn't have to be as wide as it is, okay? Now, with curb line and a narrower travel lane and just a very limited offset, you would see much better results in terms of reducing speed, because you do not have granite curbing out there right now. And nobody wants to hit a granite curb because your front end, especially if it's new curbing, because it does have a pretty sharp edge to it. So, but anyways, I'm just throwing some things out there that for all of you to consider. That shared use path in reality is it's wider. It's sure because of that it can accommodate bikes, but it's really just a glorified sidewalk. So, go ahead.
Daniel Issa, Blue Hill Drive, that's Issa, E-A-S-A, and I will limit to 2 minutes. Please cut me off if I go over. I am a walker, I am a biker, I am a runner. I promise you this, I am in favor of this project. I'm sure we'll have many iterations, and hopefully some of them will be better than what we have currently in front of us. Overall, I am in favor, but I promise you this, whether it goes through or not, every time I bike or run down Canton, I cross every one of those 50 driveways, and I will do so with or without a shared use lane. They are still there. You still have to watch for me, and I still have to watch for you, because there are many people who don't watch for me. I still slow down at every driveway. I don't know who's coming. It won't change anything if we're smart. As bikers, as runners, we still have to be careful. My second point, and I will be done, I will be walking home tonight. For those of you driving on Canton, please do not hit me. Thank you.
Hi, Michael Harrison, Harrison. I live at 485 Canton Street. I'd just like to lend my voice to the people who have spoken in opposition to this project. When I moved here about 3 years ago, I first heard about the project at the Zoom meeting. I promised I would keep an open mind. I saw the plans. I didn't know whether, frankly, to laugh or cry. Sort of the complete destruction of Canton Street to build a white elephant shared use path between a busy rotary and Topgolf that I can speak, I think, for the majority of the residents on Canton Street we don't want. I've heard, I'm sorry, I forget your name, somebody call it a glorified sidewalk. I can promise you the people whose front yard the glorified sidewalk are going to be in. A 10-foot sidewalk, a 10-foot shared use path is not a glorified sidewalk when it's in your front yard. I can also say, personally, in order to accommodate the project as currently designed, the Canton Street will be moved about 10 feet onto my front yard. I'm the father of a 1.5-year-old, and my wife is 8 months pregnant. That's 3 million cars, most of which are speeding, that are now going to be 10 feet closer to my front door, 10 feet closer to where my kids play. So as much as I would like them to have a sidewalk, I'm not going to do it at the expense of having 3 million cars driving over what is now currently my front lawn. So for those reasons, I'm opposed to the current plan. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nicole Nocera, N-O-C-E-R-A. I live at 598 Canton Street, and I am opposed to the plan in its current form. I know there's been some comments this evening about not having a great representation of young families here tonight. I am one of them, so I am opposed to it in its current form. And the reasons why are numerous. A lot of them have already been shared this evening, but I will share this. In its current form, I could lose more than 10 trees, mature trees, on the front of my property. I know a reason for this proponent, or a positive attribute of this project in its current form, is infrastructure, and there was a call about the drainage system in its current state and the impact of stronger storms. If you clear cut more trees, you are adding to the root cause of these stronger storms. So that is another reason why I'm opposed to this. I will leave it with this. I grew up in Watertown, which is a very lovely town, but it's very urban. I moved and lived in Jamaica Plain, which is a lovely town, but it is very urban. And I lived in the North End with my husband, which is a lovely city, but is very urban. This is how it starts. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anna Leung, last name Leung. I lived in 610 Canton Street. I moved here this March. So I'm relatively new to this community, and this project started. While moving here less than a year, we noticed the island that is right outside my house that has a sign that tells people should sway to this side or sway to this side. It got hit 3 times. 610 Canton Street. It's on a slope. Okay? That slope could easily be more than 45 degrees. Cars just zooming in, and even the cars climbing up the mountain. I call it mountain because it is like a mountain to me if I were to walk up. But I want to let you guys know how dangerous it is. Even for cars coming in, going up that hill, they have that speed to torn one of the sign out. It is a safety issue. So I just want to address that so you guys are aware of it during this planning. I do have 2 young kids, 8 and 9-year-old, and I'm here because this is a project that, you know, my kids' future. But when I saw the plan, I know I don't need any, like, bike path, maybe a small sidewalk. I'll be happy with it. Okay? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Maura Van Wagenen. I live at 181 Canton Street, and that is VANWAGENEN. I have lived on Canton Street for 31 years. I have had 2 girls grow up on the street. They are now 30 and 27. I truly appreciate the safety issues of crossing Canton Street. We have learned to live with it over the years. With that said, we have learned to live with it. We bought into Canton Street knowing what it is like and have learned to live on it. On a lot of sections of Canton Street, there is a really nice grassy area that people can walk, maybe not run. I'm not a runner. I do like to bike occasionally, but I usually carry my bike and take it somewhere and do it that way. But with that said, a sidewalk would have been nice. A sidewalk, a small sidewalk, because my primary concerns are really that it is a scenic byway. And I think these sorts of streets in the town or country or wherever should be respected. Because once you take them away, they don't come back, or they don't come back for a long time. And I, having lived here, like to appreciate the way it does look, or to keep it as close to that as possible. And that includes the trees and the stone walls. Call me old-fashioned, call me whatever. I know change is inevitable, but I think it can be done tastefully. And I think that is a lot of what I'm hearing here. One of my big concerns, I am a healthcare provider, is the trees and breathing. There's a lot of natural growth that aids the environment with water runoff, air quality. The trees offer buffer. We live very close to 95. Do you know what the studies are for asthma in children that live in urban areas because they don't have enough green space? You're really taking away you know, going to be putting a lot more asphalt and cement. We don't need more of that in society. We really don't. In terms of the scenic byway, the scenic street of Canton, and what I was really amazed, and I see that the planning board is making some adjustments to the bylaws that they exist. There are 12 in this town of Westwood, which gives it its character. And as the person before expressed, Watertown, Newton, Brookline, all of those are beautiful towns and cities that have great sidewalks. That is how they were created. And I respect and enjoy those places, but I also respect more rural settings, which I really think we need to think long and hard of when we come to making great changes as what is proposed. I was very, very saddened that the community was not more involved in this process. You know, as you have heard, it has been outlined. Some people have taken better notes in terms of how it was presented. I did go to the Zoom meeting. I went to the library meeting. And I also went to the Conservation Committee when I saw that they were actually doing the sidewalk on Downey Street, because I knew that was the beginning of Canton Street. And I was very dismayed in terms of a lot of disregard for the loss of trees. And that is really something that we all need to be much more aware of. I mean, you go up and down Canton Street, any town really, and you will see so many trees being taken away. I mean, they're just clearing places just for a house with no lawn. And I think it's something society really needs to put into their planning. I want to say that one of the comments by one of the biking committee members who is here, who I really was impressed with his presentation, and one of the ideas that he had brought up at the planning board meeting was by really presenting this and making so much conflict between people in parts of town or side streets or whatever is really going to impact what is going to be able to be done in other parts of the town. So that I think it's really important that this is all a process of collaboration and by everybody involved. And I really feel that the people on Canton Street really need to have a, you may not like this, a larger input, because it does really impact us the most. This is a very large expenditure of funds from the state and federal government, hence all of us. We pay all the taxes in this, to the state and the federal government. I know this is probably part of the infrastructure plan that has come about from the federal funds. I feel the money could really be used more wisely elsewhere. I work in the city of Brockton. I see what those children go up and down on their streets with every day, and the funds are less available there. So I really kind of think about how these monies can be used. I know that the rules are that there have to be 2 sidewalks. You know what? If we want 1 sidewalk, why can't the state agree to that and maybe give somebody else 1 sidewalk for the same, for half the price? In terms of safety, I really do want to address this. You know, my children did ride bikes, not on Canton Street. We would go down to Weatherby all the time and go around Weatherby. And as far as a lot of the neighborhoods, they are connected. You go down Forbes Road, there's a road that connects to the neighborhood that'll take you to Downey Street. There are ways you can, huh? Partridge. Okay, we'll work on that. We'll work on that. I understand. And I understand after going up and down Canton Street, getting people to sign the petition, there are really some very bad parts of Canton Street. My part, I have to say, is not bad. I can cross over very easily to Blue Hill, walk down. Blue Hill never wasn't a closed street all the way. But I think there is clearing that can come off so that you can walk more softly, safely in those places. And I'm not saying this meanly, but I know Canton Terrace, and I know Canton Terrace people can walk very safely over to Blue Hill Drive. There's a very big piece of green space there. But just to touch on some safety issues that I would just really point out, I know this is really primarily the safety, safety, safety. And what I would ask you, which I did ask when I was at my meeting with Todd and Brendan, and I appreciate all your efforts and work with this. I would not want your job. Is that I'm wondering, and I know there's statistics, and someone here in the state may be able to answer this or get this answer. There are places everywhere, I heard this on a podcast somebody led me to, that there are very clear places where people are more high risk, more accidents happen. In fact, somebody here tonight told me where the highest part was today. There was a safety meeting with the elderly at the Elder Center today. And I think the person that was there is gone now. They were not aware of any of this project, by the way. But they said the #1 place in town where accidents happen is East Street Rotary. So I would like you to do a little homework for me and let me know what the incidents of safety problems have been on Canton Street over the years. I don't know that. I could tell you one story. It's about a tractor-trailer truck in front of my house. But other than that, I would like to know what the background history is of accidents on the street. Because I would be very fearful of a bike path going up and down Canton Street. I didn't realize the slope was as steep as it was. I mean, I could feel it, and I really don't think the average person can go up and down that. But if I had a young girl or boy that was going down there on a bike, I'd be fearful. I'd be very, very fearful. And the other thing to really take into consideration are the increase in electric scooters and bikes. And just the other day, I was coming down University Ave to avoid the traffic to East Street, and I was getting ready to cross at the Amtrak, and an individual on a scooter. There was a truck beside me, so I couldn't see. It's a 4-lane, and I was in the middle one, turning left. I was going to go on 95 that way. It is a fast way to get there, by the way. And an individual came in a scooter, and I did not see him, and he just went right across. So my fear is the increase of electric scooters that are going to be available, electric bikes. I think those are going to pose a lot of danger. I mean, if you look at four-wheelers, the number of deaths from those per year are 200,000. It's incredible. So the future is before us. So with that said, I did see online one of our friends that have been involved with us kind of brought us to your DOT website. And I found that one of your intentions in terms of this whole project was to maintain the integrity of the environment. And that will be where a strong effort for me will be. So with that all said, I would just say I oppose the project as it stands now. I'm sorry, I cannot agree with it.
Okay. All right, thank you for your comments this evening. And, at this time, having listened to all the comments, certainly, very, very eye-opening. And, MassDOT will be probably talking with the town again, and also the town's designer, TEC, to review and go over everything received this evening, and perhaps go over to see what the next steps will be. So with that, John, if there's no further questions.
Hello, this is working. I don't know which mic works here or not. I just want to thank everybody for coming, and to reiterate what I had said earlier this evening. Our next steps from the town's perspective, we actually do have a scheduled call with MassDOT on October 23rd in the morning. Following that call, we will be meeting with the select board that evening on October 23rd. It is a virtual meeting. Brendan, myself, John Rockwell, and members of the TEC team will be there. And it's our hopes that we obtain some feedback from MassDOT. They obviously, like Larry had just mentioned, we heard what we heard tonight. It was a public hearing, and that was the point and purpose of this meeting tonight, is to solicit some feedback. We obviously know where most of the feedback was. And then we'll have that conversation, we'll have that meeting with MassDOT, and then meet with the select board members on the night or the evening of October 23rd. And it's our hopes that we have a direction after that point, or at least have a solid discussion about what our next steps are going to be. So, as I mentioned earlier, nothing's inevitable, and I always relate things to a baseball game. Second inning right now, we can easily adjust. We can go back to the first inning. We're not too far off, and let's just see how we can work possibly cohesively with the state and see what we can do to find that common ground that I mentioned to earlier. So I do appreciate everybody's comments, your concerns. They were definitely heard. And yes, 2 hours ago, I really didn't want my job either, but tomorrow morning I'll wake up and want it back, so it's all good. But this is why we're here, and I thank everybody for coming.
If there are no other questions or comments, I'd like to remind you that the last sheet of the handout is a mail-in sheet. If you have any further questions or comments which you would like to submit, please email MassDOT at massdot.state.ma.us or use this sheet for that purpose. You may leave this sheet with me tonight, or you may mail it to the department within 10 business days of this date, and it will become part of the official record. Before I close this hearing, I would like to say that we will be here as long as you are interested in looking at the plans, and we will try to respond to questions that affect you personally. Thank you very much for attending and for providing us with this facility. I declare this hearing closed at 10 p.m.